Hey guys, this is James from TeaDB, filming episode or InBetweenIsode number 14. And so today we are giving my stomach a brief break because I actually just filmed InBetweenIsode number 13, the Boolong Beauty, which is a raw pu'erh from 2014. And it's definitely one that is strong and pungent, and you should be careful with consuming it in high quantities or operating heavy machinery. That sort of thing. And so today, I am drinking a ripe pu'erh. And so one question that Denny and I always ask each other on the show, is when would you have this tea on a daily basis? And the answer can be different, tea to tea. But for me these days, because I'm doing the tea of the months, January and February are both sort of young raw pu'erhs. A lot of these days, my day is I'll drink that tea first, and that will be sometime between 3 or 4, so usually in the morning time, maybe right after lunch. And especially if it's especially young tea, I'm going to want to round the day out with something much, much darker. And for some people, that might be a heavily more oxidized oolong or a roasted oolong, like a Oriental Beauty or a Dongding or some yancha. But for me, that almost always is some sort of pu'erh that is much darker. So that will often be an aged pu'erh or a ripe pu'erh or something like that. And so for me these days, a lot of times I've happened to come across a huge pile of ripe pu'erh samples from Yunnan sourcing, as well as whatever else crosses my plate. So for me these days, I've been almost drinking just as much ripe pu'erh as I have been sort of like the tea of the month teas, like a Linsong tea. And so these sessions vary from really nice sort of Gushu ripe pu'erh, like the Shiza Hao one, to some of these lower budget Yunnan sourcing ones. And so today's tea, which I don't even think I've mentioned yet, is the 2012 Yong de Blue. And so this was actually kind of a standout, and what can be a fun task, especially if you end up with random samples that vendors will often include, is drinking those samples and not paying attention to the price, developing your thoughts independent of that, because I do believe that does make a significant sort of psychological impact on how we kind of brace ourselves or expect to taste tea, and then seeing what it is. And this was one of those very, very pleasant surprises, of which there are more than a few on Yunnan sourcing, where I was like, wow, this is quite enjoyable. And I enjoyed it more than I would say 80% of the ripe pu'erh samples. And sure enough, it's $17.50 for a cake. So extremely inexpensive. And I think I should also note that this tea is very much to my taste. The first InBetweenIsode I filmed was for Yong de Organic from a factory. This is actually Scott's own production. And so I think I certainly may have a strong regional bias towards sort of this northern region, Yongda perhaps ripe pu'erh. So I should also note that. But I should also say that if you liked that cake, you are probably likely to like this cake. And I think it's quite nice. So the leaf material, and I'll show you guys the wet leaf at the end, is very, very small leaf. So it kind of gives this rich, creamy flavor. I guess I'll wait till we actually drink it, but it gives out its flavor very, very quickly because it does have these smaller leaves. Alright. And you really don't need to use the same sort of leaf to water ratio that I do for raw pu'erh or something like that to get all that much out of this tea. So I'll tend to brew these ripe pu'erhs or even these aged pu'erhs a little bit lighter, just as kind of like a rounding out tea. Not wanting to consume too much caffeine over the course of the day. So very aromatic as well, I would say, which is another one of the tea's assets. So my girlfriend kind of described this as having this smooth cocoa flavor, and I would tend to agree. It has a very, very upfront, sweet richness to it, that is characteristic of a lot of smaller leaf ripe pu'erhs. I also said that maybe there's a little bit of caramel, stuff like that. For me, this is definitely fits into the extremely easy to drink, sort of daily drinker sort of thing. I could have this at any point of the day, really, but these days it sort of fits in as sort of like that balancing sort of session. Another thing to note about this tea is that it is spring 2012 material. So a lot of times for these ripe pu'erhs, they're going to use lower grade leaves that are almost nearly always plantation leaves that will probably be harvested during the summertime, which is, I mean, supposedly the lower quality material. So the fact that this uses spring leaves can help to set it apart as well. At this point, there's very, very little funk in it as well. Another thing that can often be off-putting about ripe pu'erh. Yes, very, very smooth. And unlike a lot of these younger raw pu'erhs, it's also a very warming tea. So I feel like it would be especially seasonally appropriate kind of in these colder months, especially if like me, or in the Western Hemisphere, and you have somewhat cold winters. Seattle doesn't have especially cold winters, like we're not going to get into the 10s or the zeros or anything like that, but it does get in the 30s or 40s, and I find that teas like this are really, really nice in that regard. Alright, so I'm going to show you guys the wet leaf, which, as you can see, is extremely small, and so that's going to help it to brew up really, really quickly. So this is not a tea where I would say you should toss the first 5 steeps or whatever and then start drinking. You're going to get very little out of that. This tea is going to hit pretty quickly, and it'll die off a little bit quicker as a result. And that's just kind of a byproduct of the base leaf material in here. So overall, I would definitely say to check this tea out. I would say it's totally okay to buy a blind cake of this at its inexpensive price of $17, $17.50. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Let me know how you liked this episode. Leave some comments. Would you like to see me review some more ripe pu'erh, raw pu'erh? I drink a lot of this stuff, but I don't talk a ton about ripe pu'erh as much as I do raw pu'erh. So if you guys enjoyed that, please let me know. And thank you guys for watching. Cheers.